What is the price of loyalty? For Elara, a woman who gave her husband everything it was her sight, after a tragic accident plunged her world into darkness, the man who vowed to be her eyes became her tormentor. He was a millionaire obsessed with perfection, and a blind wife was a flaw he refused to tolerate. One cold afternoon, he led her into the glittering heart of a luxury mall, whispered a final cruel goodbye, and vanished, leaving her utterly alone. But in that moment of absolute despair, a different hand reached out from the darkness, a hand belonging to a man who saw not her disability, but her strength, a man whose father governed the state. The scent of Julian's cologne, a sharp, expensive blend of sandalwood and bergamot, was the first thing Elara noticed that day. It was overpowering, a stark contrast to the sterile, antiseptic smell of the hospital that had been her world for the past 3 months. He had insisted she dress up. "We're celebrating, my love," he'd said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Celebrating the end of your confinement. A new beginning." Her fingers, now her most trusted guides, trembled as she smoothed down the silk of the dress he'd chosen. It felt cold against her skin. Before the accident, she would have known its color the way it caught the light. Now, it was just a texture, a memory. Elara Vance had once been a celebrated sculptor, her hands coaxing life from cold stone and wet clay. She saw the world in shapes, in lines, in the interplay of light and shadow. Then came the screech of tires on a rain-slicked road, the horrifying crunch of metal, and an explosion of light that had ironically been the last thing she would ever see. The doctors at St. Jude's Hospital had been kind but firm. The damage to her optic nerves was catastrophic and irreversible. Julian Thorne, her husband of 5 years, had played the part of the devoted spouse perfectly, at least for the cameras and the society pages. He was a self-made millionaire in the tech industry, a man whose public image was as meticulously curated as his art collection. He had sat by her bedside, holding her hand, his voice a comforting murmur. But in the quiet moments when the nurses were gone, the murmur had morphed into sighs of impatience. His touch became perfunctory, his presence a fleeting obligation. "Try to be a little faster, Elara," he'd chide gently as she struggled to navigate their sprawling Fifth Avenue penthouse. "The caterers are arriving soon. Or, are you sure you need to use the cane indoors?" It's so clinical. He had fallen in love with Elara, the artist, the vibrant, independent woman whose work was her passion. He had not signed up for Elara the burden. The gilded cage he had built for her began to feel like a prison. The silence in their home grew heavier each day, punctuated only by Julian's increasingly frequent business trips. That afternoon, he led her to his car, a pristine Aston Martin. His hand on her elbow was firm, steering her like a piece of furniture. "I have a surprise for you," he announced, his tone artificially bright. "Something to make you feel beautiful again." They arrived at the shops at Columbus Circle, a cathedral of commerce where the air itself seemed to hum with wealth. The sounds were overwhelming for Elara. The echoing footsteps on polished floors, the cacophony of 1,000 conversations, the distant chime of a pianist. It was a sensory assault. Julian guided her through the throng, his grip unyielding. "Where are we going, Julian?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. Her white cane tapped an uncertain rhythm against the marble. "Patience, darling. It's a special jeweler. I saw a necklace that will be divine on you. A constellation of diamonds, so you'll always have stars with you." The poetry of his words was hollow, a rehearsed line that failed to mask the coldness beneath. He led her to a secluded alcove with a plush leather bench away from the main flow of traffic. The distant piano was clearer here. He sat her down gently. "Just wait here for one moment, Elara. I need to make a quick call before we go in. My phone's dying, so I'll use the charging station just around the corner. I'll be right back. Don't move." She nodded, trusting him. She listened to his footsteps retreat, the expensive click of his leather shoes, fading into the mall's ambient noise. She sat her hands clasped in her lap, a perfect portrait of wifely obedience. 1 minute stretched into 5. The piano music stopped. 5 minutes turned into 15. A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. He was a busy man, she told herself. The call was probably important. 20 minutes. 30. Panic began to prickle at the edges of her composure. She reached into her purse for her phone to call him, but her fingers found only her wallet, her keys, and her lipstick. He had taken her phone that morning, claiming it needed a software update. A cold dread, colder than any fear she had felt since the accident, began to seep into her bones. She stood up, her cane sweeping in a tentative arc in front of her. "Julian!" She called out, her voice barely a whisper. "Julian, are you there?" The noise of the mall seemed to mock her. Laughter from a nearby table, the whir of an escalator, the chatter of shoppers laden with bags. She was invisible, a ghost in a world of sight. Just then her ears picked up a faint, familiar chime. The notification sound from Julian's phone. It wasn't distant. It was close. It came from the designer handbag of a woman walking past a woman whose arm was linked with a man's. The man was laughing. The cologne hit her a second later, sandalwood and bergamot. It was Julian. He wasn't at a charging station. He was walking away with another woman. Her heart shattered. He had been planning this. The dress, the surprise, the lie about his phone. It was all a meticulously cruel performance. Tears streamed down her face, silent and hot. But she didn't realize she was crying until a new voice, a deep and gentle baritone, cut through her haze of shock. "Excuse me, miss. Are you all right?" Before she could answer her own phone, the one she thought Julian had buzzed in her coat pocket. She had completely forgotten he'd slipped it back in after they left the car. With trembling fingers, she fumbled to answer it. It was a text message. She used the phone's screen reader function, lifting the device to her ear. The robotic voice was chillingly devoid of emotion as it read Julian's final words aloud for her and the kind stranger to hear. "Elara. I can't do this anymore. I married a whole woman, not half of one. My lawyers have dissolved our joint accounts. You'll find a cashier's check for $50,000 in your purse, a severance package, if you will. The doorman at the penthouse has been instructed not to let you in. Have a nice life. Don't try to contact me." The phone slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the marble floor. Her legs gave out, and she sank back onto the bench, a ragged sob escaping her lips. He hadn't just left her. He had erased her. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of sound and sensation. The robotic voice from her phone echoed in Elara's mind, each word a hammer blow against the fragile shell of her composure. A severance package. Have a nice life. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it stole her breath. She was adrift in an ocean of noise, her blindness a suffocating cloak. The cheerful holiday music piped through the mall speakers sounded demonic. The scent of coffee and perfume from a nearby cafe was nauseating. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the splintering pieces of her reality together. "Miss." The gentle voice returned closer this time. "Let me help you with your phone." A moment later, she felt the cool plastic of her phone being pressed gently into her palm. Her fingers instinctively closed around it. "My name is Nathaniel." The voice continued calm and steady. I couldn't help but overhear. That was monstrous. "Are you hurt?" Elara shook her head, unable to form words. A fresh wave of tears blurred the darkness. Hurt didn't begin to cover it. She was annihilated. Julian had taken her sight, and now he had taken her life, her home, her future. He had left her on a public bench like a forgotten piece of luggage. "Can I get you some water? Or perhaps we could move to a quieter place," Nathaniel suggested. There was no pity in his tone, only a deep, resonant concern that felt like the first glimmer of warmth in a universe of ice. She managed a small, choked nod. She felt a light touch on her arm, hesitant and respectful. "Is it all right if I guide you?" he asked. Again, she nodded. His hand was warm and firm on her elbow, a stark contrast to Julian's impatient proprietary grip. He moved slowly, matching her pace, his presence a solid anchor in her swirling vortex of panic. He led her away from the echoing atrium, the sounds of the mall softening as they entered what felt like a small cafe. The rich aroma of roasted coffee beans and pastries replaced the cloying blend of perfumes. He guided her to a chair at a corner table. "I'll get that water," he said. His footsteps were light and confident. Left alone for a moment, Elara's mind raced. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? The world Julian had shown her was one where weakness was a liability, something to be discarded. This stranger's kindness felt alien, suspicious. Yet she had no other choice. She was stranded. Nathaniel returned, placing a cold glass in her hand. "Here you go," he said, his voice soft. "My name is Nathaniel Sterling. Please drink some water." She took a sip, the cold liquid. A small shock that helped clear her head slightly. She finally found her voice, though it was raspy and fragile. "Elara. My name is Elara Vance. It's a pleasure to meet you, Elara, even under these terrible circumstances," he said, his voice imbued with a sincerity that chipped away at her suspicion. He didn't press her for details. He simply sat with her in the quiet, allowing her the space to breathe. After a few minutes of silence, broken only by her quiet sniffs, he spoke again. "Elara, I don't want to intrude, but you're clearly in shock. Do you have anyone you can call? Family? A friend?" The question was a fresh stab of pain. Her parents were gone, lost to illness years ago. Her friends were Julian's friends, society acquaintances who valued status above all else. They would side with him, the successful, charismatic millionaire, not the broken blind woman he'd cast aside. "No," she whispered the single word heavy with the weight of her isolation. "There's no one." She could feel his contemplation, a palpable silence that stretched for a long moment. She braced herself for him to make an excuse to call security and hand her off to rid himself of this unexpected complication. "All right," he said, his tone decisive. "Then you'll come with me." Her head snapped up in his general direction. I can't. I don't even know you. I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition." He stated his voice, firm but kind. "I can't in good conscience leave you here. What your husband did is beyond despicable. You need a safe place to go, a place where you can think and decide what to do next. I can provide that. No strings attached, I promise." He spoke with an authority that was both commanding and reassuring. She was exhausted, emotionally, mentally, physically. The thought of navigating a shelter, of explaining her story over and over to strangers, was unbearable. This man, Nathaniel Sterling, was offering a lifeline. It was a terrifying risk placing her trust in another stranger so soon after being betrayed. But the alternative, staying on that bench, waiting for security to find her, was so much worse. Why, she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would you help me?" There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, tinged with a sorrow she didn't understand. "Because I know what it's like to watch someone you care about feel lost in the dark. My mother, she fought a degenerative illness for years. I learned that sometimes a steady hand and a safe harbor are the most important things in the world. Please let me offer you that." His words were not a pickup line or a platitude. They resonated with a truth and a pain that she recognized. He understood loss. He understood darkness. In that moment, her fear was eclipsed by a desperate, flickering ember of hope. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay." "Good," he said, a hint of relief in his voice. "We'll leave whenever you're ready. My car is in the garage downstairs." He helped her to her feet, his hand once again a steady presence on her arm. As they walked out of the cafe and toward the elevators, he described their surroundings in quiet, precise detail. "We're passing a bookstore on our left. The big glass windows are filled with new releases. The elevator is just ahead to the right of the main fountain." He didn't treat her like she was helpless. He treated her like a person who simply couldn't see. He was her eyes, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel like a burden for it. The journey through the bustling mall was no longer terrifying. With Nathaniel Sterling at her side, it felt manageable. As the elevator doors slid shut, enclosing them in a quiet, metallic space, Elara felt a profound and surreal shift in her existence. One man had led her into this mall to abandon her in the darkness. Another was now leading her out, offering a flicker of unexpected light. The ride in Nathaniel's car was a world away from the ostentatious roar of Julian's Aston Martin. This vehicle was quiet, the engine a low hum, the interior smelling of worn leather and something clean like fresh rain. It was an Audi, she guessed, from the solid feel of the door and the smooth ride, a car built for comfort and safety, not for showing off. Nathaniel drove with a calm confidence, navigating the city traffic, without the aggressive honking and sharp turns Julian had favored. They didn't speak much during the drive. Elara was too exhausted to formulate questions, and Nathaniel seemed to understand her need for silence. He turned on the radio to a classical music station, the soothing notes of a cello concerto filling the space between them. It was a simple, thoughtful gesture that spoke volumes. She had expected him to take her to his apartment, or perhaps a hotel. Instead, after about 20 minutes, the car pulled into a private underground garage. The air was cool and still. "We're here," Nathaniel said softly. "This is the Sterling Foundation building. We keep a few private residential suites on the top floor for visiting fellows or special circumstances. I think this qualifies." He led her from the car to a private elevator that opened directly into a magnificent suite. The moment the doors slid open, Elara could sense the space and elegance of the place. The air was fresh with a faint scent of lemon and lavender. The floors beneath her feet were polished hardwood, partially covered by a thick, soft rug. "Welcome," Nathaniel said, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. "Let me give you a quick tour so you can get your bearings." He guided her gently, his hand on her elbow, describing everything with the same patient detail as before. "You're in the main living area. There's a large sofa and 2 armchairs in front of you, centered around a fireplace. To your right is a wall of windows that overlooks the city. To your left is a small, fully stocked kitchen. Down the hall behind you are 2 doors. The first is a bedroom with an ensuite bathroom, and the second is a study. He led her into the bedroom. The bed is a king. Nightstands are on either side. The door to the bathroom is directly opposite the foot of the bed. Everything you need should be in there. Fresh towels, toiletries. I'll have some clothes sent over for you in the morning. It was overwhelming. The sheer generosity was more than she could process. Nathaniel, this is too much, she stammered. I can't possibly accept all this. You're not accepting a gift. Elara, he corrected her gently. You're accepting help. There's a difference. The foundation is here for this very reason, to provide support when it's needed most. Please think of this as a sanctuary, a place to rest and recover. He then introduced her to another person whose presence she hadn't even detected. This is Mrs. Gable. She's the residence manager and a dear friend. She lives in a suite just down the hall. She'll be here if you need anything at all, day or night. She's the soul of discretion and kindness. A woman's voice, warm and with the gentle cadence of someone in their late 60s, spoke up. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Vance. Don't you worry about a thing. We'll take good care of you. Elara felt a sense of security she hadn't realized she was missing for months. It wasn't just the physical safety of the locked doors. It was the atmosphere of genuine care that surrounded her. I'll leave you to get settled, Nathaniel said. Mrs. Gable will bring you some dinner shortly. Is there anything you'd like in particular? Anything is fine, Elara murmured, still dazed. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. Get some rest, he said, his voice soft. That's all the thanks I need for now. We can talk more tomorrow when you've had a chance to process everything. I'll leave my number with Mrs. Gable. She heard his footsteps retreat and the soft click of the elevator doors. Mrs. Gable showed her where the light switches were a habit of kindness Elara appreciated and explained how to use the suite's intercom system. She promised to return with a tray in an hour. Alone at last, Elara navigated her way to the sofa and sank into its plush cushions. She ran her hands over the rich fabric, then the cool, smooth surface of the wooden coffee table. She found the cashier's check from Julian in her purse. $50,000. The price he'd put on 5 years of marriage, on her love, on her sight. A wave of nausea and rage washed over her. She crumpled the check in her fist, the sharp paper digging into her palm. Later, after a simple but delicious meal of soup and fresh bread, brought by Mrs. Gable, Elara found her way to the bathroom. The hot water of the shower was a balm washing away the grime of the day, and some of the chill that had settled deep in her bones. Wrapped in a thick, fluffy towel, she felt human again. She lay in the enormous, comfortable bed, the clean scent of the sheets a world away from the cloying perfume of her old life with Julian. Sleep, however, remained elusive. Her mind was a chaotic gallery of memories and fears. The screech of the tires, the coldness in Julian's voice, the crushing weight of his betrayal. But amidst the darkness, a new image flickered. The memory of a kind voice, the feel of a steady, respectful hand on her arm. Nathaniel Sterling, the son of the Governor Alistair Sterling, she now realized. The name was famous, a political dynasty known for its wealth, power, and unusually its integrity. Why would someone like that help someone like her? His story about his mother was a possible reason, but it still felt surreal. As she lay there listening to the distant, muted sounds of the city, a single terrifying question echoed in the silence of the luxurious suite. What happens now? Meanwhile, in his own home. A few miles away, Nathaniel Sterling was not resting. He sat in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk, the city lights twinkling below. He had already made a few calls. The first was to his head of security, a former FBI agent named David Chen. David Nathaniel said, his voice low and serious. I need a comprehensive background check done on a man named Julian Thorne. Tech sector, public-facing. But I want to know everything that's not public. Financials associates, patterns of behavior, and I need it fast. His second call was to the family's top lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Amelia Reed. He recounted the story Elara had shared and the text message he'd heard. Amelia was silent for a moment before responding, her voice crisp and businesslike. Abandonment, potential financial fraud. This is ugly, Nate. The man is a fool. Leaving her in a public place like that creates witnesses. He thinks he's clever, but he's just arrogant. We can protect her. We can fight this. That's what I want to hear, Nathaniel said. I want him to understand that some actions have consequences that money can't fix. He ended the calls and stared out the window. He thought of Elara, her pale, tear-streaked face, the tremor in her hands, the quiet dignity she maintained even after being so utterly broken. Julian Thorne had made a grave miscalculation. He thought he was discarding a broken object. He had no idea he was placing her directly in the path of a man who had dedicated his life to fighting for people just like her. The battle had just begun. Julian Thorne sipped his champagne, the crystal flute cool against his lips. He was in the penthouse suite of the Baccarat Hotel, gazing out at the glittering tapestry of the city. A slender blonde woman in a red dress draped herself over his shoulders. Her name was Victoria Croft, the daughter of a rival tech CEO. She was beautiful, ambitious, and most importantly, she was not broken. You seem so relaxed, darling, Victoria purred, trailing a manicured finger down his chest. Finally shed that excess baggage. Julian smirked, turning to kiss her. The trash has been taken out. A clean slate. He felt no remorse. In his mind, his actions were not cruel. They were necessary. Elara had become a liability, a constant draining reminder of imperfection. Her blindness was an anchor dragging down his meticulously crafted image of success and power. The parties they could no longer attend, the pitying looks from their social circle, the sheer inconvenience of it all, it had become intolerable. The $50,000, he reasoned, was a generous gesture, more than she deserved for holding him back for so long. He had been planning his exit for weeks, systematically moving assets into offshore accounts, setting up a new life, a new narrative where he was the unencumbered titan of industry. Leaving her at the mall was a stroke of genius, he thought. It was public enough that she would be found, but anonymous enough that he could disappear without a messy personal confrontation. By the time she figured out what to do, he and Victoria would be on a private jet to the Cayman Islands. His phone buzzed on the marble tabletop. It was a notification from his bank. He glanced at it, expecting a confirmation of a wire transfer. Instead, a bold red alert flashed across the screen. Account frozen. Pending legal review. Julian's blood ran cold. He snatched the phone, his fingers suddenly clumsy. He tried to access his other accounts. One by one, the same message appeared. Frozen. All of them. What is it, Julian? Victoria asked, her voice losing its seductive edge, replaced by a flicker of concern. "It's nothing," he snapped, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "A technical glitch, but he knew it wasn't a glitch. This was a targeted surgical strike on his finances." "To huset asku." Nausap had been so careful. He frantically called his lawyer, a slick corporate shark named Peterson. "What the hell is happening, Peterson?" Julian snarled into the phone. "Why are my assets frozen?" Peterson's voice was grim. "You've been served, Julian. Or rather, an injunction has been filed on behalf of your wife, Elara Vance. Her new legal counsel is Reed and Sterling." The name hit Julian like a physical blow. Reed and Sterling wasn't just any law firm. It was the law firm representing the city's old money and its most powerful players. It was Alistair Sterling's family firm. How Julian whispered, his arrogance evaporating, replaced by a raw, chilling fear. How did she get to them? I don't know. But they're moving fast, Peterson said. They're citing spousal abandonment and filing for an emergency injunction to prevent the dissipation of marital assets. And frankly, leaving your blind wife in a shopping mall gives them a hell of a moral high ground. What were you thinking? Julian sank onto the edge of the bed, the champagne flute forgotten in his hand. He had made a terrible, catastrophic mistake. He had assumed Elara was helpless, isolated, and weak. He never imagined she could, within hours, gain the backing of one of the most powerful families in the state. Miles away in the quiet sanctuary of the Sterling Foundation suite, Elara was rediscovering a part of herself she thought was lost forever. After a long, restful sleep, she had woken with a sense of clarity. The grief was still there, a raw, open wound, but the paralyzing shock had begun to recede, replaced by a slow, burning anger. She'd had a long talk with Nathaniel that morning. He and Amelia Reed had explained the legal situation, the steps they were taking to protect her and secure what was rightfully hers. For the first time, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a fighter. During their conversation, she found herself talking about her art. She described the feeling of clay under her fingers, the way she could see a shape through touch alone. Nathaniel listened, captivated. Would you like to sculpt again?" he asked tentatively. "I could have some materials brought here." A lump formed in her throat. Since the accident, she hadn't dared to touch clay. She was afraid that the connection was gone, that her hands without her eyes would be useless. It was a fear she couldn't voice to Julian, who would have seen it as just another weakness. But with Nathaniel, she felt safe enough to be vulnerable. "I don't know if I can," she admitted quietly. "You won't know until you try," he encouraged her. "There's no pressure. Just an opportunity if you want it." She agreed. A few hours later, Mrs. Gable helped her set up a table with a block of fresh clay water and simple tools. For a long time, Elara just sat there, breathing in the familiar earthy scent. Then slowly, she reached out and pressed her hands into the cool, yielding block. The connection was immediate. A current of energy seemed to flow from her fingertips into the clay. Her hands remembered. They moved with an instinct that transcended sight, kneading, shaping, pulling. She wasn't trying to create something beautiful or recognizable. She poured all her pain, her anger, her betrayal, and the flickering new feeling of hope into the form. It became a maelstrom of textures, rough and torn in some places, impossibly smooth in others. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel returned. He stopped in the doorway, silent. Elara, her hands and arms covered in clay, was lost in her work, a focused intensity on her face that he found breathtakingly beautiful. "Elara," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, a small smile touching her lips. "It's a mess," she said. "It's incredible," he corrected her. He walked closer, standing beside the table. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the sculpture. At her nod, he gently ran his fingers over the surface, following the contours she had created. He could feel the story within it, the jagged edges of her pain, the deep gouges of her anger, but also in a soaring upward curve, a sense of resilience. "You see with your hands," he said in awe. "It's a different kind of vision, but it's powerful." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, a shared understanding passing between them. He found himself wanting to know everything about her, not just the story of her tragedy, but the story of her life, her art, her dreams. He told her more about his mother, an amateur painter who had lost her sight to macular degeneration in her final years. She always said that the world didn't disappear. Nathaniel shared his voice, thick with memory. It just changed shape. She learned to appreciate music and the texture of things in a new way. "Your sculpture, it reminds me of her strength." In that shared moment of vulnerability, something shifted. Elara realized she wasn't just a charity case to him. He saw her, the real her, the artist, the survivor. And Nathaniel realized that his desire to help Elara had deepened into something more personal, something that felt dangerously close to falling in love. The days that followed settled into a new healing rhythm for Elara. The Sterling Foundation suite became her studio, her sanctuary, and her war room. In the mornings, she would speak with Amelia Reed, her lawyer, going over the details of her life with Julian. It was a painful process dissecting a marriage she had once believed in, but with every document they uncovered, a clearer picture of Julian's deceit emerged. He hadn't just been neglectful after her accident. He had been actively planning to leave her for months before it quietly siphoning money from their shared businesses into his private shell corporations. The anger this revelation sparked became fuel. After her calls with Amelia, Elara would turn to the clay. Her hands became her voice, her work, a visceral diary of her emotional journey. She created a series of sculptures, each one raw and powerfully expressive. She didn't try to replicate the precise, realistic forms she had been known for before. This new work was abstract elemental. One piece, a twisted column of rough, gouged clay, she titled Severance. Another, a pair of cupped hands, fragile but unbroken, she called Sanctuary. Nathaniel was a constant, gentle presence. He never crowded her, but he made sure she was never truly alone. He would often work from the study in her suite, providing a quiet companionship that she found deeply comforting. He'd read to her, in the evening's poetry news articles, chapters from novels, his deep voice a soothing balm. He described the changing colors of the sunset outside her window, with such vivid detail that she could almost see it. He was in awe of her artistic resurrection. He saw the genius in her new work, a raw power that was perhaps even more profound than her earlier pieces. One afternoon, he brought a visitor to the suite. "Elara." "This is Genevieve Dubois," Nathaniel said. "Genevieve is the head curator at the Met Breuer." Elara's heart skipped a beat. The Met Breuer was at the pinnacle of the contemporary art world. She felt a flush of insecurity, acutely aware of her clay-stained sweatpants and the chaotic state of her makeshift studio. "It is an honor to meet you, Miss Vance," a woman with a soft French accent said. "Nathaniel has shown me photographs of your new pieces. They are formidable." Guided by Nathaniel's descriptions, Genevieve examined each sculpture. She didn't touch them, but Elara could hear her soft gasps, her thoughtful hums. "This is work that needs to be seen," Genevieve said, finally her voice filled with conviction. "It tells a story of profound loss, but also of incredible resilience. It is the kind of art that defines a generation of artists. Ms. Vance, with your permission, I would like to propose a solo exhibition. We will call it Echoes in Clay." Elara was speechless. Tears welled in her eyes, but for the first time in a long time, they were tears of joy. An exhibition at the Met Breuer was a dream she hadn't dared to entertain, even when she could see. To have it offered to her now felt like a vindication, a testament to the fact that losing her sight had not meant losing her vision. Meanwhile, the legal battle against Julian intensified. The media had caught wind of the story, thanks to a few carefully orchestrated leaks from Amelia's office. The headlines were brutal: "Tech mogul abandons blind wife Thorne's empire built on cruelty." Julian's carefully constructed public image crumbled overnight. Business partners pulled out of deals. His company's stock plummeted. He became a social pariah. Cornered and desperate, Julian fought back with venom. His lawyer sent Elara a cease and desist letter, a document filled with threats and accusations. It claimed she was a mentally unstable gold digger, manipulated by the Sterling family to extort money from him. Amelia read the letter to Elara over the phone. The words were vile, designed to wound and intimidate. A few months ago they would have shattered her. But now, sitting in her sunlit studio, her hands resting on the cool clay of her latest piece, Elara felt a surprising surge of strength. "He's afraid," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Good." With Nathaniel's unwavering support and Amelia's brilliant legal strategy, she refused to be intimidated. They countersued for punitive damages, citing emotional distress and breach of fiduciary duty. They had him cornered. His assets were frozen, his reputation was in tatters, and his escape plan was ruined. He was a caged animal, and Elara knew with a chilling certainty that a caged animal was at its most dangerous. She didn't yet know how dangerous he could truly be. The relationship between Elara and Nathaniel deepened with each passing day. It was a slow, gentle courtship, built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. He never once made her feel defined by her blindness. He loved her quick wit, her fierce passion for her art, and the quiet strength that radiated from her. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, he reached out and took her hand. His fingers interlaced with hers, his touch sending a warm current through her. "Elara," he began, his voice hesitant. "I know the timing is complicated, and your life is in turmoil. But I need to be honest with you. My feelings for you, they've grown beyond friendship. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met." Her heart pounded in her chest. She turned her face toward the sound of his voice, a smile blooming. "I feel the same way, Nathaniel," she confessed. "You came into my life when it was pitch black, and you showed me how to find the light again." He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion or pity, but one of profound tenderness and understanding. It was a promise of a new beginning, a future she had never thought possible. But as they embraced the hope of what was to come, a desperate plot was being hatched across town. A final vicious lie designed to destroy Elara completely. Julian Thorne was drowning. The legal fees were astronomical. His lines of credit were cut, and Victoria Croft had vanished the moment the scandal broke, taking a priceless diamond bracelet with her. He was trapped in a 5-star hotel he could no longer afford, watching his life's work burn to the ground on the evening news. The story of his cruelty had made Elara a sympathetic figure, a phoenix rising from the ashes, championed by the city's golden boy, Nathaniel Sterling. Julian was the villain, a caricature of greed and heartlessness. Desperation breeds monstrous ideas. He met with his lawyer, Peterson, in a dark, wood-paneled bar, his face pale and haggard. "We're losing Julian," Peterson said bluntly, swirling the ice in his scotch. "They have the moral high ground, the better lawyers, and the deeper pockets. We need a miracle, or you need to settle and try to salvage what's left." "No." Julian hissed, his eyes wild. "I will not give her another dime. I won't let her win." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We don't need a miracle. We need to change the narrative. We need to make her the villain." Peterson raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And how do you propose we do that?" "She's a blind artist, betrayed by her husband. St. Joan of Arc has a worse publicist." "The accident," Julian said, a venomous spark in his eyes. "It's been her shield, her sob story. What if it wasn't an accident?" He proceeded to weave a new despicable fiction. He told Peterson that Elara had been deeply depressed after a recent gallery rejection. He claimed she had been drinking that night that they had argued, and that she had grabbed the wheel of the car in a moment of reckless despair. He painted a picture of himself as the long-suffering husband trying to save his unstable wife from herself. The crash, he alleged, was her fault, a failed suicide attempt that had tragically taken her sight and nearly killed him as well. "It's a bold claim," Peterson admitted, intrigued despite himself. "But it's your word against hers. Why would anyone believe you now?" "Because I have a witness," Julian said with a triumphant sneer. His witness was a man named Leo, a disgruntled former mechanic from Julian's company, whom he had fired for theft months earlier. Julian knew Leo had gambling debts and a grudge. For $100,000 in cash, Leo was more than willing to swear he was driving behind the couple that night and saw their car swerve erratically as if in a struggle. He would testify that he saw Elara's silhouette lunge towards the driver's side just before the crash. The accusation hit the press like a bombshell. It was the twist the media had been craving. The story instantly became more complex, more salacious. Was the abandoned blind wife actually a manipulative, unstable woman who caused her own fate? The narrative shifted. Doubt like a poison began to seep into the public consciousness. For Elara, the news was a devastating blow. Nathaniel broke it to her gently, his voice filled with rage on her behalf. But the words still cut her to the core. Julian's lie was insidious because it preyed on her deepest insecurity, her fragmented memory of the crash. She remembered the rain, the argument they'd been having about his increasing distance, the terror. But the final moments were a burr of screeching noise and shattering glass. "Did I?" she whispered to Nathaniel, her hands trembling. "Could I have? I was so unhappy, Nathaniel. Maybe I did something reckless." "No," Nathaniel said, his voice ironclad. He took her hands in his grip firm and grounding. "Do not let him do this to you, Elara. This is the last desperate act of a guilty man. He is trying to poison your own memory, to make you doubt your own truth. I don't believe him for 1 second, and you shouldn't either." His faith in her was an anchor, but the seed of doubt Julian had planted was a venomous weed. It haunted her sleepless nights and cast a shadow over her work in the studio. Nathaniel, however, was not a man to sit back and offer comforting words. He channeled his fury into action. He put his investigator David Chen on a singular mission: dismantle Julian's lie piece by piece. David started with the witness Leo. A little digging revealed his recent termination for theft and a string of substantial payments he'd made to a bookie, all in cash, starting the day after he gave his statement to Julian's lawyers. It was circumstantial, but damning. The real breakthrough came from the car itself. The police report had noted that the vehicle's event data recorder, the black box, had been too damaged in the crash to be readable, its data corrupted. To everyone else, it was an unfortunate dead end. To David Chen, it was a red flag. High-end cars like Julian's had hardened, redundant systems. Total data corruption was highly unlikely unless it was deliberate. Working on a hunch, David's team expanded their search for evidence beyond the immediate crash site. They pulled weeks of security camera footage from every gas station, convenience store, and traffic camera on the route Julian and Elara had taken that fateful night. It was a painstaking, needle-in-a-haystack search. For days they found nothing. Then late one night, David called Nathaniel, his voice electric with excitement. "We've got him, Nate. We've got him cold." He had found it. A grainy but clear video from a small independently owned gas station about 5 miles from the crash site. The timestamp was just 20 minutes before the 911 call. The footage showed Julian's Aston Martin pulling up to a secluded air pump at the edge of the lot away from the main lights. Elara remained in the passenger seat. Julian got out ostensibly to check the tires, but the camera positioned at the perfect angle captured him doing something else. He knelt by the front driver's side wheel, his back to the station. He produced a small, glinting tool from his pocket. For 30 seconds he worked quickly and deliberately under the car. Then he stood up, casually pocketed the tool, and got back behind the wheel. David had an expert automotive engineer analyze the footage. The conclusion was unequivocal and horrifying. Julian Thorne wasn't checking the tire pressure. He was severing the car's brake line. The accident wasn't an accident. Elara's recklessness hadn't caused it. It was a calculated, cold-blooded attempt at murder. Julian hadn't just wanted to leave his wife. He had wanted to erase her permanently, and when that failed, her blindness was the next best thing, a prelude to his eventual abandonment. The betrayal was deeper and darker than Elara could ever have imagined. The evidence was irrefutable. The gas station footage, combined with the expert analysis and the financial trail leading to the bribed witness, painted a picture not of a bad husband, but of a calculating monster. Nathaniel and Amelia immediately turned everything over to the district attorney's office. The arrest was swift and merciless. Detectives from the NYPD apprehended Julian Thorne as he was having breakfast at his hotel, attempting to project an air of unbothered confidence. The cameras were there to capture it. Or the click of the handcuffs, the shock on his face, turning to a mask of pure rage as he was led away in disgrace. The charges were staggering: attempted murder, reckless endangerment, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit perjury. His entire life, built on a foundation of lies, had come crashing down in a single public moment of reckoning. For Elara, the revelation was a crucible. Learning that the man she had once loved had tried to kill her was a trauma that went beyond heartbreak. It was a fundamental violation of her trust in the world. She didn't collapse, however. The strength she had cultivated over the past months, the strength she had found in her art, in her friendship with Mrs. Gable, in her love for Nathaniel, held her steady. She grieved for the woman. She had been the naive young artist who had fallen for Julian's charm. but she did not let his darkness extinguish her light. Nathaniel was by her side through it all, a quiet, unwavering pillar of support. He held her when she cried, listened when she raged, and sat with her in silence when words were not enough. He didn't try to fix her pain. He simply shared its weight. The legal proceedings were a media circus, but Elara was shielded from the worst of it. The divorce was finalized quickly, the judge awarding her the entirety of their marital assets in light of Julian's heinous criminal acts. Julian Thorne was convicted on all major counts, his trial a short and brutal affair, given the mountain of evidence against him. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in a maximum security prison, his name forever synonymous with greed and betrayal. Elara found she didn't want the money for herself. It felt tainted, stained by Julian's evil. With Nathaniel's help, she used the fortune to establish the Vance Foundation for Artists with Disabilities, ensuring that others who faced physical challenges would have the resources and support to pursue their creative passions. It was a fitting tribute to her journey turning the ugliest part of her past into a beautiful future for others. 6 months after Julian's arrest, the Met Breuer opened its doors for the premiere of Echoes in Clay. The gallery was filled with the most influential figures of the art world, philanthropists and media. The sculptures stood on white pedestals, spotlit in the hushed, reverent space. They were haunting, beautiful, and achingly powerful. The critics were unanimous in their praise, hailing Elara Vance as a major transformative voice in modern art. Elara stood near the entrance, radiant, in a simple, elegant navy blue dress. Nathaniel was at her side, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. He was her eyes that night, describing the scene to her in a low, loving murmur. "There are at least 200 people here, Elara," he whispered into her ear. "They're crowded around Severance. They're completely silent, just looking. Genevieve is talking to a critic from the New York Times, and she's beaming. Your work is touching them. You've filled this silent room with your voice." Tears of gratitude welled in her eyes. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "Thank you, Nathaniel," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything, for seeing me when I couldn't even see myself." He turned his head and kissed her palm. "I love you, Elara," he said, his voice earnest and true. "Not for the woman you were or the artist you've become. I love you for the incredible, resilient, brilliant person you are right now." She couldn't see the adoration in his eyes, but she could feel it in his touch, hear it in his voice, sense it in the very air around them. Julian had tried to leave her in darkness, a broken thing to be forgotten. But in that darkness, she had found a clearer vision than she had ever known. She had found her true artistic voice. She had found her strength, and she had found a love that was not a gilded cage, but a true sanctuary. Her world was no longer defined by what she had lost, but by the infinite, beautiful possibilities of what she had found. Hand in hand with Nathaniel, she stepped forward into the warm, bright light of her new dawn. Elara's journey reminds us that our greatest strength is often forged in our deepest moments of despair. She was left with nothing, but in that darkness, she rediscovered everything: her passion, her power, and a love built on true sight. Seeing the soul, not just the surface. Julian Thorne believed he could throw her away, but he only propelled her toward her true destiny. What did you think of Elara's incredible transformation? Could you have been as strong as she was? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If her story of resilience and love inspired you, Please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear a story of hope. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will touch your heart. Thank you for listening.